All right. So we watched Ben-Hur yesterday, Benny. You've had almost 24 hours to think about it.
That's right.
Like how have you've absorbed it, and like what is your analysis? What are your feelings on it?
So we watched this, and I guess I can't talk about Ben-Hur or Benny without also talking about Larry.
Yes.
Uh, of course, and Larry is kind of Hollywood insider. That's what there's a film called Lawrence of Arabia made, and so what was it, 1962? And anyway, so that's Larry, Ben-Hur, Benny. We watched Larry last weekend, and so both these are 3 hour and 45 minute uh, cinematic epics. Um, I had a very different response to Benny from the one that I had to Larry. I greatly enjoyed both films. I have more detailed things I could say, but I guess I want to first, just before I do that, like address my initial observation, just having experienced these two mega films. The goal of this exercise is that we talked about, let's find movies to watch that would be challenging because they are long and probably dry. And we picked movies that we thought would be long and dry and hard to watch. And boy,
Yeah.
boy, we just got more than we bargained for. Not dry at all. I find it, particularly with Ben-Hur, I found the movie to be emotionally challenging. Um, both with Larry and Benny, though, held my attention quite well. And that said, and you're going to have to interrupt me at some point, Mike, because I'll just keep talking. That said, as I shared with you, I did watch each of these movies starting at 11 a.m. my time, 12 noon my time,
Yeah.
and found myself heavily caffeinated and not really able to physically sit still. So if you can imagine, I'm sort of dancing around the living room while engaged watching these movies, occasionally taking notes in my little Mike's Movie Podcast notebook.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, it was a good movie. What do you
Yeah.
think?
I just want to say, before I logged on to this call here, I was going through the Internet Movie Database
Uh-huh.
and just looking at the ratings. And I just want to mention that according to IMDb, the user ratings, that Avengers Endgame is higher rated than these two movies.
All right.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. I was thinking one of the things I would have liked to do, maybe for the second podcast on Larry and Benny, what if we read the Wikipedia pages? In fact, we could just read that live, over the phone. No, that's funny. I too had to do a little digging around, particularly for Larry, because there was just too much historical context that I was not aware of. Uh, and I think was critical to my enjoyment of the piece.
Hmm.
Um, of course, Lawrence of Arabia, set in the Arabian Desert during World War One, and we don't need to go into too many more plot details. But Larry is an eccentric, uh, improbable candidate for military prowess, and finds himself in a position where he is leading the Arab revolt against the Turks. Uh, the Ottoman Turks, and goes in and finds himself deeply immersed in the Arab uprising. But both these movies, like, another thing, I don't know anything about the 50s and 60s. I wasn't around. I tend not to watch a lot of films from that era. So I had zero information or context or intelligence about what this was.
Yeah.
But they both just looked to me to be incredibly expensive. Like, even by today's standards, like, holy shit, this must have been like, this is your life's work.
Yeah.
This
I
is
mean,
somebody's, yeah.
I believe it's just going through Wikipedia. I believe at the time Ben-Hur was the most expensive movie that was ever made
Oh
at the
wow,
time,
yeah,
which I think at that time was like $15 million,
yeah.
which whatnot. So talking about the whole time frame. So here's the part with Ben-Hur, which I have a hard time wrapping my mind around, is that I interpret that movie like my initial thought is that Ben-Hur is a Christian movie, is
Yeah.
because you have Jesus Christ, who first of all, like he gives Ben-Hur water, and then like at the end, like there's the scene where he's being he's being condemned by Pontius Pilate, and then he's being crucified, and then of course the mother and sister of Ben-Hur, their leprosy gets cured. But that was the part which I just really noticed was the whole like religious theme of it. And I could see, if you were at a church, like you would watch like Ben-Hur as just like part of a group activity, which
Sure.
is which stood out to me, because I mean the last movie that I could think of that was like a blockbuster, a big movie that was that religious, overtly religious, was The Passion of the Christ back in 2004.
Okay, interesting. So I'm gonna go ahead and like I don't know if we officially disagree, but I saw the other edge of that sword. In that I found myself watching it and thinking like I really like how they've used these biblical elements and characters as cultural entertainment, as part of a broader, you know, um, sort of religious boundary crossing cultural experience, right?
Okay.
These are stories about what it means to live in Western civilization, and I saw it like that. I didn't see the movie as Christian, and in that sense, very different from something like The Passion. I saw this as sort of more like, no, I mean, this is the best, these are the best, most important mythologies that we have as citizens of Western culture. And what better basis for an epic piece of entertainment? That's just that's just me. You know what I always say, Mike, you're my friend and I respect your opinion.
Yeah. Hey, no. Okay, well, I see that one. I'm thinking this through here a little bit out loud. Uh, so and I'll think about this out loud, because a few years ago there was a Russell Crowe, Darren Aronofsky movie, Jennifer Connelly, called Noah, of course, about like Noah from Noah's Ark. And that was similar to what you were talking about, where you have like these very well-known biblical figures, which are basically used for the entertainment purposes, but not necessarily as a religious story.
Yeah.
Not something like the Left Behind series, which is about the rapture, which has a very clear message about the importance of salvation. This
Hmm.
is like Ben-Hur, like that's like the story of Ben-Hur, like that was going to be happening regardless.
Right.
That like his story arc was going to be his story arc, and then Jesus Christ is just interspersed in there
Yeah.
throughout that. So
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
I see what
Just
you're.
another just
Yeah.
another little, I mean, I see, I think I'm glad you brought it up because it's an actual thing to talk about the movie. Um Another one of my sort of just littler observations, like watching these movies and like just watching a character like Ben-Hur like basically go through agony throughout the duration of a 3.5 hour saga. I was comforting at a time like this, just because it's like I feel like everybody is in a culture of sort of worry and complaint, understandably. But just think about Ben-Hur rowing those oars in the galleys, man. 3 years, getting his back laid open with whips.
Yeah.
Fucking A, man.
Yeah.
Whoops.
Well, no, it's very fine. I'll say, just for total posterity, as we record this, it is April 5th, 2020, and we are very much in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I say that just in case, 15, 20 years from now, we come across this recording and we want to be reminded of what Evan was talking about there. I think that, that's true. And that's, the something that I also liked in the movie, talking about like when Ben-Hur, when he's down in the galley, and of course when his mother and sister are basically in solitary confinement for 3 years with leprosy. One
Hmm.
thing that I did not expect coming into the movie at all was the amount that they focused on the suffering and how they vividly portrayed it.
Hmm.
Because I think typically in movies, what you'd see is like, Ben-Hur, and he got captured, and he got captured, and now he is a Roman slave. Then it's like
Yeah.
15 years later, and then
Hmm.
they basically like they had the capture cut to the rebellion, and then they just have
Hmm.
like 15 years later with 15 20 seconds of him doing whatever he's doing. But this
Right.
movie really lingered on that. Like
Yeah.
one thing that I really liked in that regard, like, was when they were in the galley, and the ship captain was like, normal speed,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
battle speed, attack
Yeah.
speed, ramming
Ramming
speed.
speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like I shared with you on the phone earlier. That was my favorite scene, um, and maybe a close second to the chariot scene at the end, which is just sort of like, again, like even by today's standards, like what an incredible, like exciting scene,
Mhm.
you know, like, and done without the aid of any sort of major special effects when they're
Yeah.
racing the chariots. That also, as I thought, probably the most in terms of like the physical brutality of the movie. Uh, the key antagonist, the governor or whatever,
Masala.
Masala,
Yeah.
is trampled during the final lap of the chariot race, and the depiction of his wounds and suffering is quite, uh, it's ghastly.
Mhm.
And then we snickered after during our debrief call that the movie's actually rated G.
Yeah.
And in those days, we expected kids to be tough.
Yeah.
So now, if you go to see a G-rated movie, I mean, it's going to be a pixelated snowman or a Pixar snowman. Um, you know, just some fluffy clouds and a bunch of bright colors. I don't know what you can even take kids to these days. But this
That was
movie will make you tough,
yeah.
okay? Which is what we all need right now. It's COVID time. This isn't a time to be getting all mushy and engrossed in your own
Yeah.
feelings. Get out there and you row those oars.
Yeah.
Break the horses.
Well, yeah, you mentioned too, like for these COVID times, there is something that is a bit comforting where I think we're fortunate enough where even through this, I mean, what we're doing is I'm drinking some coffee right now, and I'm sitting on my couch, and we're still watching movies and having a Zoom call here and recording this, and
That's right.
so there still is relative comfort that we have in our existence right
Yeah.
now. Uh, so so that, and then when you watch a movie like Ben-Hur and you see all the suffering there, you kind of puts things into perspective a bit. I also want to say like that the thing that I just said right now is what gives me enjoyment, a lot of enjoyment about that comment, is I can picture Adam listening to that and just like being overcome with like feelings of like how lame my commentary is, and that just gives me a lot of enjoyment because I think I'm thinking about talking about things on a very pure and in a lot of ways mundane level, and I
This
think
is about, yeah. Well, it's back to the essence of the show. This is two true blue boys talking about some good movies, having a good time, you know, respecting each other's feelings.
yeah. So when did you for Charlton Heston, for Chuck, we'll call him Chuck.
We got
What is your
Chuck and we got Petey.
what was your first exposure to Charlton Heston as an actor in your life?
Yeah, so that's another thing. I had actually never seen a Charlton Heston movie. The only movie two movies I'd seen Charlton Heston in. One of my favorite movies of all time, Wayne's World 2, where he makes a comedic cameo. And two would be just footage from an NRA rally that was shown in Michael Moore's
Yeah.
movie, Bowling for
Oh
Columbine.
my cold dead hand.
That's right. That's what I knew. That's like what I'd seen of Charles. I mean, I knew he had been in these movies. I knew about Ben-Hur and Ten Commandments and all that, but I certainly never sat down to watch him. So, you know, there were a couple moments during the movie where I almost wondered if he was a bit of an over actor.
Mhm.
Although, just the way that like menacing jawline like slashes through the screen, it's just like crazy. You know, both Chuck and Petey, of course, Peter O'Toole. You know, it's like we don't see that today. You know,
Yeah.
people just don't do that anymore.
Well, yeah, we have a lot of time here on our hands to watch these movies and to study the acting trends in the 50s and 60s. But I feel like I feel like a little bit of overacting was a bit of was the style at the time.
Yeah.
'Cause I think about, I don't know how much you ever watched like the old original William Shatner Star Trek movies from the or TV shows from the 60s. So I feel like
Yes.
there's a certain like movement where people are still, and then they have like a very like intentional but like rapid display of emotion of like
Hmm.
uh you know pounding their fist pounding their fist on the wall and like putting their head into their arm and just like holding it there in a very pronounced fashion. you know
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like that was based on these two movies and a few Star Trek episodes I've seen. I feel like that was kind of more of the acting style at the time.
Yeah. No, I hear that. I don't know. Like I said, I mean, in case it isn't clear to anyone who's listened to me on this previous podcast, I know very little about movies. Uh, you know, but that doesn't stop me from doing my best, which is what we're doing right here. You know, keep things moving. And yeah, this is good. Like I said, I took a few notes too. It's what else we got going on here?
We need to talk about Lariat a bit in a moment, but do you have some more notes about Benny you want to go over?
Um, well, I have some questions. Do you remember? So the relationship between Benny and Masala. So Masala is a Roman who was sent to Judea to live with Benny, right? So they kind of grew up as like brothers. I
Yeah.
missed why that was. Like so these two have this history, and then things turn sour when Masala as an adult decides he wants to just pursue absolute power and sort of betrays old Benny. But what was the origin of that relationship? Do you remember?
I I do not remember. So
Okay.
there's not a whole lot of discussion to be had. I mean, whenever I'm watching a movie like this, it takes me or any movie in general. Like the first 45 minutes, the details are always going to be a bit fuzzy, and I'll piece them together later as the film progresses.
I know.
But that would be an example of one. I just was under the impression that they grew up together and then they just like went their separate ways because Masala was a Roman and
Well,
and,
so that's my
and her
right.
was a Jew.
That's my bigger question. I was curious about the extent to which Romans and Jews intermingled in that way.
Mhm.
And I don't want to really talk about it on the cast. It's something I want to look into a bit more. And also the ramming scene, where Benny is freed. Who are the Romans fighting in that scene? Are those just like random pirate ships? Are those the
That is
Greeks?
that is something that I did not catch that one either.
God damn it, Mike. Okay, all right.
That's and this is good. So we these are questions that we should have answered ahead of time, but we're not going to. We're just gonna have to leave it as a mystery. You'll have to watch it for yourself to find out.
So these are hard movies, right? I mean, you can't just fight. This isn't just like turn it on, whatever. And there's just a lot of shit going on. And maybe even harder with Larry. Like Benny, at least there's lots of the overall arc of the story is fairly easy to follow. I don't know. Both movies very action packed.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good transition here to talking about Larry a little bit, because with Ben-Hur, you basically have the Romans. You have Judea and like the Roman Empire. Like that's the central conflict there, which is fairly easy to follow, even though we didn't follow all of it, as evidenced by us being confused about who they were fighting in that in the ramming scene. But like for Lawrence of Arabia, you're talking about like early 20th century Middle Eastern geopolitics, which I will confess I had a very difficult time following what exactly was going on in Lawrence of Arabia. And I've since like watched a 30-minute YouTube video explaining it, which did not clear things up that much. So
No, I like the idea of a character like Larry, who this is a real life dude who was, a legit polymath, who found himself in the military as an expert on, Arab relations, but was really more of sort of a humanist and a scholar, and didn't really fit the military mold. And he's sent out into the desert to find this prince who is supposed to help lead the Arab Revolution, which of course is good for the Brits, of which Larry is a member of the British Army, because they want the Arabs to help them defeat the Turks. And so this was also like this was the sort of secondary part of the war, right? So it doesn't get as much focus in the history books because it's not about the big war on the Western Front. But yeah, I mean, again, too, like both these movies, incredible amounts of just grandeur and sparing no expense, but also very closely focused on like one virtuosic male performance in each case. So I got to ask you, what if it was a contest? Let's say Chuck and Pete were up against each other. So the movies weren't made in the same year. Benny was 1959. I think Larry's was 62. 63.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if they were going head to head, who would you give the Oscar nod to?
Asking me, I would my thought would be would go to Pete for that one.
I would agree with you.
I feel like Lawrence of Arabia, I feel like his character had more of an arc.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good. You know what, Mike? I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree. Both characters were trying to portray like a range of black and white, good and evil impulses, both having internal battles. But I just thought O'Toole, the peaks, the extremes were so much more like just much deeper. That guy's nuts, man.
Yeah, no, we're gonna have to watch some of the other movies where he was nominated for Best Actor but didn't win. I feel like with Ben-Hur, like that character, like he was always at his core, he was always righteous, and like he struggled with he struggled with some very understandable desires for vengeance.
Right.
Whereas with Lawrence of Arabia, where he was a good person, but then like he was struggling with was like how he enjoys killing people. So it's so I think there's like Ben-Hur always had that compass. He deviated a little bit, but then he came right back. Whereas Lawrence of Arabia, I think that he evidenced by the final scene when he's like take no prisoners.
Yeah,
and just like
got a wickedness in him.
People.
Yeah.
Which may or may not be actually true. I mean, based on the actual historical person, but in the movie, and I just felt. I mean, for Lawrence of Arabia, like for Peter O'Toole, I felt that transition.
Yeah.
And again, I'm bad with the characters' names, but there was like his close friend
Omar
who
Sharif.
yeah,
Oh,
who
yes.
who kind of at a certain point just who views that as well. But it's
Well, Omar Sharif got his day in the sun, on this same stage, this 4-hour mega movie epic thing for Dr. Zhivago. And I don't know. I'm happy to talk more about Larry and Benny, but for me, I feel like the discussion we've had is sort of reflects my level of depth of understanding. It's like, and it's probably sufficient, but I also wanted to get some time chatting about what we might put on the docket for, the next round. Like, what's the next 4-hour epic? Got lots of good options, and Dr. Zhivago is one that I thought of that might be.
Well, ones that immediately come to mind. So the original idea that we had for this one is let's find like the most dry, long movies that we can watch. So
Right.
from what I can gather, one that really does fit that description is Gone with the Wind.
Yeah. So that is actually, that will be painful. I have been forced to watch pieces of that movie. I'll do it. But I'm not looking forward to it. But that would be a doozy.
I think for the time being, I think the movies, at least for the first 5 to 10 informal range, I think they need to be 3+ hours long.
I think that's a minimum requirement.
That's the minimum requirement. And then we can maybe adjust it from there. So I think the 10 Commandments is another one.
Yes. I don't think they should have been. I think they should all be in that same era, late 50s, early 60s, 3+ hours, 10 Commandments. We talked about Bridge on the River Kwai, Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor. That's actually 4 hours long. Again, Dr. Zhivago.
I think we could also take a look too, just naturally see where things take us, because we have Peter O'Toole, we have Charlton Heston. We can just kind of explore their filmography and figure that out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
this is an adventure in cinematic discovery. It
is. It is indeed. Is there anything else we want to cover about Larry or Benny?
That is, well, let's I'll just say with those movies, so I enjoyed that both of the movies had an overture where they just had a solid 5 minutes or so where they had some music playing, and for Ben-Hur they had a close-up of the Birth of Man painting, and they just had it had the text there, overture, so you knew exactly what was going on.
I like that when they do that. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a good thing that all movies should have, because you settle in for 5 minutes, clear your mind, some forced meditation, and then you kind of go into the movie with a clear mindset. Don't really have that. And I think that would, whether it's whatever movie it is, whether it's Adam Sandler, whether it's a Leonardo DiCaprio picture, just have a nice overture.
How would you feel about inviting Adam on for a podcast on Uncut Gems?
I would look forward to talking about Uncut Gems. I mean, that's another one to get into.
A friend told me about a description of Uncut Gems the other day on the Cable Guide channel.
Yes.
They give a little one sentence synopsis.
Funny man gets into some funny business.
So tune in next time for Uncut Gems. Funny man gets into funny business. Yeah, that really does sum it up. Yeah, we also mentioned, like, I do think at some point we need to acknowledge the work of On Cinema at the Cinema, which is, Tim Heidecker's thing that, I don't know how else to say it, but, like, we have solid evidence, Mike, that you and I were doing basically the same thing at a much lower level
Mhm.
years before he started doing On Cinema. And so I think we were maybe doing it unintentionally. There was more of a purity to it, but anyway, just thought I'd
I'm
throw that
gonna
out there.
I'm gonna have to watch that. I haven't seen it myself, just so I can comment on it. I will say that throughout these podcasts, there is a pervasive sincerity that I have to my analysis,
Right.
where back when I was in sixth, seventh grade, I'm like, I want to be a movie critic, and to this day, I still feel that. And as much as I want to be self-aware about it at my core, it's like I want to analyze these movies.
Well, maybe you
So
shouldn't watch On Cinema at the Cinema. It's kind of like two guys making fun of the kind of thing that we're doing. Uh,
yeah.
but
I don't know though. I mean, I think that we're in this area now where I think that sincerity is too often mocked.
yeah,
Sincerity and quality are not the same thing, but I think sincerity rules the day.
yeah.
What is your for Larry but both of these movies, like what is the most like mundane observation that you have? Whether it's like, wow, those movies, they had some very bright colors or something like that.
The mundane observation, and it is the most sincere observation, is that I thought, oh God, these are going to be grinders, like these are like fuzzy, pixely, long, sleepy, boring orchestra overlaid movies. I'm not going to like them. I have memories of being a small child and stuff like this coming on TV and just being miserable about it. You know what I mean? So, like, that's
Yeah.
what I'm walking into. And then you sit down, and like you said, after the first, 30 minutes of like processing details, it's like incredible. They're just really good. Like I'm as entertained watching this as I am watching, what Game of Thrones or whatever people like,
Uncut
that
Gems.
Uncut Gems. Yeah. Yeah. It's like what, so they're just good. That's the mundane observation. It's like, hey, they spent $16 million on a movie and hired the best actor of the day. And wouldn't you know it, it was a good movie.
Yeah, right. Well, he, when watching Ben-Hur, I had like a couple flashbacks to my past. I don't know if you remember. I think this would have been 11th grade English class, and there was a Michael Caine, Sean Connery movie called The Man Who Would Be King that we
Okay.
watched, and I just have like I did have some flashbacks when I was watching Ben-Hur about being ages like 9 to 16 and being at school, and you have the TV that's on the rolling rack, and it's like somebody puts a VHS in of one of these movies, and I remember like just kind of the dread that I would have
Mm-hmm.
of of watching them. And there were a couple moments when I was watching Ben-Hur when I would feel like, wow, like a 10-year-old me would have been just like so like upsettingly bored by this right now. But that's obviously not how I felt watching
Right. Well, I
them.
guess you could say, I guess this is growing up.
So yes.
So for
Well, it
those of
is.
you who don't know, that's Blink 182. It's it's kind of an old song, but
Not many people
old,
know about Blink
old,
182.
old favorite of mine. Mike
Yeah.
and I, as we're growing up now. We're more refined in our tastes.
Yeah.
I don't
So,
can't just
well,
be
here's
watching Beethoven and Beethoven's second all the time.
mhm.
Throw some
Here's the thought
some good
for you.
stuff in there.
Blink 182, their day, like 1999, 2000. That they're when Enema of the State came out, like that was probably peak 180 Blink 182. That
Hmm.
was that was 21 years ago.
Hmm.
So 21 years before that came out was like 1978. Think about that.
I mean, that's incredible. It's just simple math, and yet so mystifying. You know, 20 years before that, you had Benny.
Yeah. Whoa. So I feel like there's some sort of like Mr. Show type joke that we could make that would not be as funny because we're not Bob Odenkirk and David Cross. I don't know, man. Like I could keep on talking. I could keep on rambling about stuff. You know, these movies were great to look at. Beautiful pictures, every frame of painting, whatever you want to say.
Yeah.
But I could keep on rambling. Or I could just, we could stop while we're ahead. That's the key to winning in business.
I like a shorter podcast. I personally don't want to listen to 2 hours of me and you talking.
Okay.
But I might listen to 30 minutes.
Okay. Is that where we're at right now? Close to
Probably. I think.
All right.
Let's just cut it. All right. So before we do, we're gonna observe a timeless ritual. It may seem crude, especially in this application, since these are fairly sophisticated pictures, as we talked about. This is about growing up as movie watchers. But I'd like to hear your cheeseburger rating. We have the cheeseburger rating system where we quantify the quality of these films. And it's 1 to 5 cheeseburgers.
1 to 5 cheeseburgers. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's start by saying if you had to watch one of these movies again, all right. So you're at a big screen theater. They have the 70 millimeter print.
Yeah.
You have $15. I'm sorry, you have $25, which is enough to buy a ticket and enough to buy a nice large Diet Coke and maybe some popcorn and whatnot. And they have 2 screens, both movies starting at the same time, one night only. You can only see one of them. Which would it be?
Okay, well, here's my answer. So first of all, I want to say, and you just evaded the question of the cheeseburgers, but we'll get back to that. I want to say that, on Amazon Prime, where we watch this, because we do not illegally download movies. We don't do that.
That's punishable by 5 years in prison. And
I went on Amazon Prime and I wanted to pay the max price, a premium price, and I saw 2 options. So you could rent the HD version of Larry or Benny for $3.99, right? Or you can buy it for $9.99. So what do you think I chose?
I think you bought it.
I bought both of them because I absolutely intend to watch both of these movies at least one more time, probably 2 or 3, before I kick the bucket. And however, so I want to give a more thorough answer to your question. Which one would I see given the choice? If it's in the theater, 70 millimeter, I'm going to go with Benny, because as a big picture spectacle, I think that one takes the cake. But if it's like, okay, you only get to own 1 deluxe Blu-ray copy, I'm going to take Larry, because I actually like that movie better.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to both of them are going to get 5 cheeseburgers from me. And I just think, that's the way it is. And, so on cinema at the cinema, there's 5 bags of popcorn thing. And that, I swear to God, they got wind of our podcast and saw the cheeseburger rating system and thought, well, just do bags of popcorn. But 5 cheeseburgers for Larry and 5 for Benny.
Now, is there any distinguishing characteristic of the cheeseburgers though, where one is?
Yeah, we'll say so 5 cheeseburgers each, but we'll put bacon on one of Larry's cheeseburgers. Okay, it's rasher bacon because Peter O'Toole is British. It's a rasher of bacon.
Yeah,
cheeseburger.
I would say for my answer, I would say if I were to see one of them in theaters, it would be Larry.
Interesting.
Because of just the expansive desert and just the general like isolation and desolation of that. I think you get a good experience of that in a theater.
Well, that is cool. That is cool.
So,
that is cool.
Geez, I don't know. So that's what I would say. I like them both. I would say again, I'm with you. 5 cheeseburgers for Larry, 5 cheeseburgers for Benny. Which one did I like more? You know what? I'm going to say probably just by a very, very small margin. I would say Ben-Hur.
Okay, interesting. So you kind of took the opposite position of me.
Yeah, I think the what puts Ben-Hur ever so slightly over the top is I just think the brutality of the movie, of just the, again, Ben-Hur being in the galley, his family being in prison, just that you know, his revenge storyline. I just feel like that one just really really resonated with me quite a bit. Maybe slightly more than you know, the arc of Lawrence of Arabia. There, same time, if you ask me the same question tomorrow, I might give a different answer.
How about that?
It's tough. So
there you have it, folks. Larry and Benny, two top-notch films that not a lot of people know about. So we will see you next time. We don't know what we're going to be doing. Might be another one of these epics.
Can you wait, keep on recording for one more moment
Mike
before we do that?
Is going to do a little send-off announcement. What do you got?
Okay, hold on a second. Hold on a second.
You know,
wait a second. Hold on a second.
The clock's ticking, Mike. We don't have. Yeah, I know what you're doing.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
It was a great show. We did it.